All right, welcome to Psychology 2. We're now looking at the chapter on development. Now, psychologists study development in order to understand the changes that humans experience from conception to the end of life. Because development covers such a long time span, developmental psychologists typically specialize by limiting their investigations to a particular period of life, such as infancy or childhood or adolescence or adulthood. Within any of these age stages, psychologists may focus on different aspects of development, whether that be physical, mental, social, or personality development. Now remember from chapter 1 that psychology seeks to describe, predict, explain, and control behavior. If psychologists can accomplish these goals, then we can promote health development and prevent or alter maladaptive patterns of development. Developmental psychologists seek to learn the cause of developmental abnormalities. For example, should a pregnant woman abstain from smoking or drinking? Well, yes. Now, some developmental psychologists will focus on the adult development. For example, what factors are important for maintaining a healthy relationship? What conflicts and/or changes can we expect as we develop through our 30s, our 40s, our 50s, and onward? What about the development of an older adult? The information acquired by developmental psychologists can help us understand how our physical, social, and cognitive development unfolds and explains factors that are required for normal growth. Perhaps knowing how we develop can also help us make decisions about how we rear our children or lead our own lives. So let's get started here. We're going to cover the prenatal development, the physical development over a lifetime, and language in infants, physical development in adolescents and adults, and then we're going to finish with the cognitive development in adolescence. Now we're going to start with the prenatal development and development from conception to birth. Now there are 3 stages of prenatal development: the zygote, the embryonic, and the fetal. The zygote is the union of sperm and egg. The germinal stage is the period from conception to implantation on the uterine wall. In the first 5 to 6 days, the zygote engages in cell division and produces 2 parts, the fetus and the placenta. The zygote size is that of a period. Now, the second stage is the embryonic stage, and the prenatal period of development from implantation until about the 8th week of development. Major body organs develop and are developed in this period. The size at the end of this stage is about 2.5 centimeters in length and weighs about 4 grams. Now, the XY or XX genetic code that begins to assert itself about the 7th week of development. Androgens, the male sex hormones produced by the testes if a Y sex chromosome is present. The fetal stage, the period of development beginning in the 3rd month and continuing until birth. Bone cells begin to form, and it's time of rapid growth and further development of the structures, organs, and systems of the body. Now, the amniotic sac, the embryo is suspended within this protective sac. It helps protect as well as maintain an even temperature. The umbilical cord connects the embryo to the placenta, and the exchange of nutrients and wastes happen here. Now, some of the influence on prenatal development. One of the first we'll touch on is what are known as Pterotogans. These are harmful agents in the prenatal environment that can have a negative impact on prenatal development and even cause birth defects. The damage caused depends on its intensity and when it was present during the prenatal development. Most teratogens, drugs, diseases, environmental hazards such as X-rays or toxic waste, these do the most harm during the first trimester, the first 3 months. Pterotogans such as the virus rubella can cause hearing and sight and intellectual disabilities, heart defects, and damage to the central nervous system if a mother contracts it in the first trimester. Prenatal malnutrition can also negatively affect development and have particularly harmful effects on brain development during the final trimester, the last 3 months. The use of heroin, cocaine, and crack have been linked to miscarriages, prematurity, low birth weight, physical defects, and fetal death. Women who drink alcohol heavily during pregnancy have risks of having babies with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Babies with more severe cases are intellectually disabled and have abnormally small heads with wide-set eyes, a short nose, and other anatomical abnormalities. In addition, they exhibit behavioral abnormalities such as hyperactivity. Smoking has been associated with higher rates of premature birth, spontaneous abortions, stillbirth, infant mortality, and sudden infant death syndrome. Now, coffee, unfortunately, is not free, not a teratogen. Coffee has been reported to increase the risk of miscarriage. Now, we'll touch on that's at the very beginning part, and we'll look at the physical development over a lifespan. Now, the physical development in infancy and childhood will start with length and weight. Babies usually double their birth weight in about 5 months and triple it by their first birthday. Their heights increase by 25 centimeters in their first year. Growth in the second year is another 10 to 15 centimeters in height and 2 to 3 kilograms in weight. Leading up to adolescence, children will grow about 5 to 8 centimeters a year, and weight gain is fairly consistent, around 2 to 3 kilograms per year. Our motor development starts really early with reflexes. Now, a reflex, by definition, is really a simple, unlearned, stereotypical response elicited by a specific stimuli. It's essential for survival. You do not involve higher brain functions in this. They are present from birth, and some disappear between the second and fourth month as the brain further develops. An important couple of reflexes early are sucking and rooting. Both are critical for survival. Rooting is when infants are turning their head toward a stimuli that prod or stroke the cheek, chin, or corner of their mouth. A withdrawal reflex involves infants withdrawing from painful stimuli. The Babinski reflex, infants fan their toes when their soles of their feet are stimulated. Additional motor development progresses from lifting the head to running around. You'll see this in figure 8.3 in your text. Now, maturation and experience in this instance plays a critical role. A typical sequence involves for motor development in children. You start with rolling over, sitting up, crawling, creeping, walking, and running. Again, in page 187, figure 8.3, you'll see the milestones there. Okay. Now, one of the big elements that's part of our development and has a big role in how we understand the world around us is the development of our perceptual sense, or the use of our senses. The 5 senses, although not fully developed, are functional at birth, and the newborn already has preferences for certain odors, tastes, sounds, and visual configurations. Hearing is much better developed than vision. Infants can turn their head in the direction of a sound and show a general preference for female voices, especially their mother's voice. They favor sweet tastes and are able to differentiate between salt, bitter, sour solutions, and are sensitive to pain and respond positively to touch. Within a couple of days, infants can start tracking a moving light with their eyes. By 3 months, they can discriminate colors. Now, a term that's known as fixation time is the amount of time spent looking at one stimuli instead of another. A 2-month-old infant prefers stimuli that resembles a human face. Now, there's been an experiment that's been used a lot. It's called the visual cliff. And these experiments use an apparatus to test depth perception in infants and young animals. 6 to about 8-month-old infants develop depth perception and avoid crawling off the cliff. Researchers have concluded that visual discrimination begins with infants crawling. 3-day-old infants prefer to hear their mother's voices to those of other women, and shortly after birth, infants can discriminate tastes. Now, once we've developed some of our senses, some other skill sets, like language, get developed. And there's a 2-year explosion for the development of language, where infants begin the pre-linguistic expressions, sounds without meaning. With crying followed by cooing and then babbling, these are all inborn. Now, children tend to utter their first words at around about a year's of age. Growth of vocabulary is slow at first, but at about 18 months, children are producing a couple dozen words. Now, every child is different, so please, when looking at your child, it's best to use guidelines provided by a physician to gain perspective about what's within the range of normal milestones. Holophases are single. Now, we're going to look at the development of grammar, and it's important that I start to define and get into the details of language here. Holophrases are single words that can express complex meanings, and they're often augmented with gestures, intonations, and reinforcers. Now, towards the end of the child's second year, children begin to speak 2-word sentences, and these are known as telegraphic speech. Telegraphic speech is similar to telegrams, where they're really only the necessary words are there. Anything unnecessary is cut out. Now, some contain nouns or pronouns and verbs, daddy sit, where others contain verbs and objects, hit ball. Now, the term that's known as overregulization is another important development in language. Grammatical rules for forming the past tense, the D or the ED at the end of a word usually indicates past tense, and plurals with the letter S or Z sounds. The tendency to regularize the irregular is what is meant by overregulization. So, overregulization reflects knowledge of grammar, not faulty language development, and that's an important variable. By age of 6, children's vocabularies have expanded to 10,000 words. By 7 to 9, most children realize that words can have more than one meaning. Now, along with, our growth through our childhood, we enter into our development as adolescents, and so there's physical development in adolescence. By definition, except for infancy, more changes occur in adolescence than during any other time of life. Neither children nor adults, it's a period of transition. So growth spurts, they last about 2 to 3 years, and you grow 20 to 30 centimeters. I remember, I think it was grade 8 to grade 9, I grew 6 inches. Hurt a little bit, but my view of the world was different. Literally, I was 6 inches taller, and I did it in less than a year. It was I'm not the only one who's ever done that. Puberty is a period during which the body becomes sexually mature. Secondary sex characteristics, which are body hair, deepening of the voice in males, and rounding of breasts and the hips in females, beginning of the menstruation cycle in women usually occurs between the ages of 11 and 14. Ovulation may begin 2 years after menstruation begins. And then we'll quickly just jump into the physical development of adulthood, where people are living longer than ever before. It wasn't uncommon when I was a child to be thinking of old age as 60 to 65, where you might actually start to die shortly in terms of the general population of people in that age group. But now, like I'm 60, what am I now? 65, and I'm nowhere near that period of life. Our average age has jumped up to almost 80 in terms of the average death of Canadians is in that 70 to 80 range. We're getting older and healthier. People are living longer than ever before. Let's quickly review the physical developments at different stages of adulthood. Now, this is what's had to change as we've identified adulthood in different categories. There's a young adulthood characteristics. Height of the sensory sharpness. We're at our best in our young adulthood. We're at the height of our sensory sharpness, our strength, our reaction time, and cardiovascular fitness is at its best. Sexually, most people are easily aroused and able to perform. Then there's middle adulthood. Well, here we start to diminish in our strength, and we coordinate, and our coordination and stamina is not as good, but diminishment is minor. Now, can we still maintain excellent cardio-respiration condition? Maybe. Now, for women, menopause is the final phase of the, if you will, the climacteric or the decline in female sex hormone secretion. Ovulation comes to an end. Loss of bone density, hot flashes, loss of sleep, some anxiety and depression can occur, and it occurs in women usually between the ages of 45 and 55. For men, the experience of gradual decline in their testosterone levels from about age 20, yes, from around age 20, where our peak testosterone levels are, until age 60. They may also experience a reduction in the functioning of the prostate gland, which affects the production of semen. Now, late adulthood, notice young, middle, and late. 3 degrees, if you will, or 3 phases of adulthood. Late adulthood characteristics, you have an increased number of people in this age range. The baby boomers have emerged into the old age. The middle of the baby boom is only now just getting in. So it's going to be a huge group of people. The increase in brittleness of bones and less acute sight and hearing. And reaction time diminishes. The immune system functions less efficiently as well. Now this brings us to the end of part 1 of development. Now part 2 will be a big one. Part 2, we're going to review cognitive and moral development, and that's going to be using both Erikson and Kohlberg models, and then infant attachment and parenting styles, and then we'll look at social development. So we're going to see you in the next video. Good luck, everyone, and see you next video. Bye now.